In the desert, we use trees to help cool our environment, extend outdoor living spaces, and increase property values. Strong and healthy trees can live for decades and shouldn't topple over or root up during a storm. In this video, we'll describe how to select and plant a tree for future benefits and minimal care. Before selecting a tree, you'll want to determine how much space is available above and below the ground. Tree canopies, or branches and leaves, can vary greatly in size depending on tree species. Your selected tree, once it reaches maturity, should not block road signs, utility lines, or run into your home or fences. Selecting a tree that fits its space will help you avoid the extra work and cost of pruning for size in future years. Roots need room to grow too. Think about sidewalks, fences, and bordered areas, as they may also limit tree placement. Also, before you dig, contact Arizona 811 to have your underground utilities located and marked. Your safety is important.
Now that you've thought about available space and safety, go to the Arizona Municipal Water Users Association's website and you can view pictures of Arizona-friendly desert-adapted trees and learn about their characteristics. It lists things like their botanical name and their mature height and width, flower color, and whether the tree is evergreen or deciduous. You can also check on things like how much leaf litter they drop and whether they're highly allergenic. If you have an outdoor living space on the east side of your home, consider extending the use of this space by planting deciduous trees. The leaves will provide summer shade, then drop off in the winter, allowing the warmth of the sun to shine through when it's cool outside. If you're selecting trees to shade and cool your home during the hot summer, consider planting evergreen trees on the west side. Look for trees that are hardy enough to withstand full sun and reflective sun. Once you've found a tree that fits your space, you'll want to write down its botanical name and call the nursery to check on its availability. In the desert, trees can be planted year-round, but the best time to plant a tree is in the fall, so roots have time to establish before the summer arrives. If you can't plant in the fall, the second best time to plant is in the spring.
When purchasing your selected tree, consider the size of tree and its container. A large container or box usually means the tree is older and bigger and will give an instant look of a mature landscape. But a younger and smaller tree will spread its roots and grow more quickly. If you don't mind waiting for the smaller trees to grow, these trees are often cheaper and easier to transport and plant. At the nursery, look for a tree with good structure that has balanced branches all around it. The tree should be firmly planted in the container, but not root-bound. You'll know if a tree is root-bound when there's a dense mass of circular roots in the container. Choose the best tree or perhaps shop around. You could spend decades looking at and caring for the tree you select.
This one looks like a good tree, so we're going to pull it out and take a look at it. So we found this good-looking tree that has a real nice radial dispersion of its branches. It makes a tree have a lot of good balance when the branches are coming off all the way around it like this. It seems to be a really pretty tree with some very minor things that'll have to be removed during planting. Here's where a branch has been nipped off and it wasn't done very well. And here's a little smashed part. I like it a lot, so let's take a look at its roots. So I'm going to go ahead and pull it out to see if there's any issues with its roots. So I can see some roots, but not some big roots and no real problems. It's well rooted, it's not falling apart, so that's going to make a good tree to plant.
Next, gather the items you'll need for planting: gloves, a shovel, and a tarp. If your soil is compact or very hard, compacted soil can be softened a few days before digging a hole by slowly watering the soil. You'll want the soil to be moist but not wet when digging and planting. If your tree has a nursery stake, remove the ties and see if the tree falls over. If so, tie it back up until you're ready to plant. Young trees may need to be staked, so gather the pole pounder, tree stakes, wire cutters, wire, and some old garden hose. Now let's plant. If you're planting in a finished landscape, scrape the rock top dressing to the side of the work area. Dig a hole 3 to 5 times as wide as the container, but only as deep as the soil in the container. The removed dirt needs to go on a tarp. This way it won't get mixed in with the top dressing.
The most important thing is that you don't plant a tree too deep. So we're going to move some soil around in this hole and pack it down, try to get a nice level bottom. And then we're going to check and see how we are for depth. So in the field, they would just use a shovel and they would kind of check and see, well, where's the soil at? Well, the soil's down around right here. And then you would move that over to the hole to see if you're close to being at the right depth. Another way of doing it might be to use a shovel and lay it across the hole like this and get a tape measure out and find out the depth of things. The container's about 18, the lip is 16, the soil is probably somewhere between 14 and 15. And so when we come over to the bottom of our hole and the shovel, here we are at about 14, so we might have to take a little dirt out or let the plant settle a little bit as we move it in. But that's pretty good. Looks pretty good. We're seeing a lot of dirt and not a lot of roots. If you had seen some roots that were traveling around the inside of the soil right on the container's edge, those are roots that you might want to score with a knife. This isn't all that bad, so I might just rough it up a little bit to free up some of these roots. Those circling roots would need to be cut so that they would move out into the new soil, but this is going to just need a little roughing up like this, and I think we're going to be fine. See how these roots are nice and free and ready to go. All right, so we're putting our tree in the hole and it looks pretty good. And we've roughed up these roots a little bit because we want them to expand out into this new soil to help anchor the tree. We want to have good, strong anchoring roots. And it looks pretty good for height. So we're going to use this tree stake that was the nursery stake, and we're going to put it across to check and say, yeah, it's really good compared to where we want it. We want it right up here at the soil level. It's maybe just a little bit high because I'm not touching over there, but it looks really good. Looks good for elevation, but it's a good hard tree, but it's a little bit scary to leave it like this, so we're probably going to stake this. The tree that you buy might even be more flexible and require staking as well. This tree is, the bark is really hard, but I'm a little concerned about how well it is in the ground right there. See how it's moving? So we're gonna go ahead and probably stake this. We're gonna demonstrate that as well. Okay, so we're gonna load a tree stake into the pounders. So the goal of putting these tree stakes in is going to be to not put them into the root ball of the plant that you're putting in. Put them next to it with an outward angle to them so that they don't interfere with the branches of the tree as the tree starts to grow. We're going to use 3 tree stakes in this situation, and we're going to triangulate them around the tree in order to create a little boxing ring that the tree can move around in. So here we go. Yeah, those look like they're all at the same height. So everybody's got some old garden hose laying around the house that needs to be repurposed. So here's 3 pieces of old garden hose that are about 6 inches long each. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to put it around the tree and tie it off like this and make a little boxing ring that the tree can move around in. I don't want to secure it too tight to the tree. It's going to go from each of these poles into the 3 corners of this triangle, and the tree's going to be allowed to move around freely, just not very much. Okay, I've got my little ring made, and now I need to cut the pieces of wire that I need for each of the 3 tree stakes. Double the length that it is from the center of the tree to your arm, and go out and around the stake and tie it on the inside so that the knot is on the inside of the tree so that someone walking by it doesn't get scratched. Just want to get these started. I'm going to go back and I'm going to tighten the little knots that I made on the inside with my pliers to tighten it up. That's nice and tight. We're going to go ahead and tighten the loops that we've made going to the tree poles with a pair of hand snips to put the tree more in the center of the triangle with the garden hose on it so that the tree can move around in the wind. The tissue of the tree actually gets stronger when it can move around. So the mistake a lot of people make is they hold the tree too tight and it can't move around, and then those tissues don't get to exercise. And that exercising of the tissues is what makes the tree stronger. With desert adapted plants, especially trees that are in the legume family, they are not going to be needing any of this mulch added to this soil. We don't add mulch. We don't want there to be a soil that the tree is going to grow into that's going to be different than the soil that's already there for it to grow into. So we don't want to improve the soil in any way. So we're just going to go ahead and fill it back in. We're going to talk about watering. Right here we have a newly planted Palo Brea tree, and there's a number of ways that you could irrigate this newly planted trees. We could do it with rainwater harvesting like we do at the Xeriscape Garden in the city of Scottsdale, where we coerce rainwater down through the landscape to deep water our trees. Or you could use a soaker hose. You could wrap a soaker hose around it and turn it on and do a long, slow watering. And then you could move the soaker hose out to encourage the roots to expand. We're going to demonstrate the J-loop technique of using drip irrigation to run the drip irrigation in to where the current root system of the tree is. You know, it just came out of like a 15-gallon container, so we're going to have to water it in there. But we're also going to have the irrigation in place that'll water it a little further out to encourage the roots to expand. Plus, we're going to install the irrigation that's going to be the future water for this tree. We put in this J-loop of irrigation that we've built, and we're going to connect it to the existing irrigation system. So we've located it right here, and so I'm going to cut it off and add a connector to connect the existing irrigation to our new little system that's going to water this newly planted tree. We're going to go ahead and give it a little cut right here. It's going to lay out and find out where it's going to go to, and find out where I need to cut my other tube to make it work out right. So I need about right about there. So the way these work, it's a lot like the finger torture. You have to get it on there and just wiggle it until you get it in place. Seems to be pretty secure right there. And now I'm going to wiggle and push this piece on. All right, so that's how you connect the poly tubing to the existing poly tubing. I'm going to put some dirt over it in a few places just to tie it down to the bottom of the trench. That'll make it secure for what we have to do next. So at the end of the line, we've gone ahead and we've installed a 90 and a flush plug, and we want to go ahead and put that into a 6-inch round box because that'll leave it permanently accessible to us. We're going to put that in right here into the tree well. So a little more dirt on top of some of this to get it to be great. That looks real good. So what we've done so far with this drip irrigation system is we've connected this piece of poly tubing in the shape of a J out and around our tree and connected it to the existing irrigation system using a connector or a coupler right there. And We put the terminal end with a flush cap on it in a box, and we've ran 3 tubes in to water this newly planted tree with 1 gallon an hour drip emitters on them. On the ends of the 1 gallon hour drip emitters, we've extended the tubing to get it out to the plant, and we're going to cut those off all right where we need them to be after we get the rest of the dirt in and get this looking a little bit nicer. So we've put all of our soil back in the hole, and we're gently and firmly packing it into place and getting it to a consistent level. We got the top of our tree right here from the container, and what we're going to do is we're going to put some water into this basin with the garden hose down to the bottom of the hole that we dug, and we'll let the water fill up from the bottom up, and that'll chase the air out, and the soil will settle and be nice and compact, just the way the plant would like it. Okay, so our water settling is going pretty good here. The water is filled the hole that we dug all the way up from the bottom and is circled all the way around the tree and is just about done. And in the course of getting this ground nice and soft, it makes it really easy to get these tubes drug in through the mud. And there's a little landscaper's trick that we do that, where we use a piece of PVC pipe to drag those tubes in and get them up to the root ball where we want to water, and then we nip them off right by the root ball. So I'm going to do a little sample of how I bring those in. When the landscapers drag these tubes into the ground, they let the ground get all nice and wet first, just like what we've done by water settling this tree. And then they use a piece of PVC pipe that you can slide down over top of everything. And then I'm going to flip it through the tree right here, and I'm going to go over to the other side, and I'm going to pull it into place the way I want it. So I've got it in the tube right now, but I want it underneath the ground until it gets up to the existing root ball. And so if I drag this tube like this across the ground and then I pull it out like this, that gives me a pre-buried, easily buried tube that I can cut off wherever I want to and have the water meeting up against the existing root ball. So I'm inserting the 1/4 inch tubing down past the emitter, all the way back to where it's connected into the supply line, and then I'm dragging it through the ground and through the mud, back up to where I want it, back by this other tree stake, and then I'm just lifting it off. And that's where I'm going to cut it off. And it kind of like pre-buries it for me. Very nice. I'm really thrilled about that. That looks really good. And cut it off. So we went ahead and we got this irrigation in off of our J channel to the area where the existing root ball is, the root that was in the container. But at the same time on the J channel, on the outside of the J channel, we connected some tubes for the future water for this tree. And what we're going to do is we're going to stretch those tubes out away from the tree and clip them off and cap them for future water for this tree. And we're going to do that kind of in the same way as how we stretch the water in to the tree. We're going to slip the 1/4 inch tubing into this PVC like this. Get it all the way in and get it down on the ground, and then drag it out to where we want to pull it up out of the ground, and then cover that back up with dirt, and it kind of self-buries it for us. We're going to do that with the other ones, and then we're going to clip them off, and we're going to cap them with a little goof plug for future irrigation for this tree, because the roots are going to eventually get out here and we're going to need to water out here. The biggest mistake that most people make is they plant a tree and they never move the water out, which would cause the tree to get a lot bigger up here, but the root system would stay where the water is. So this is one of our tubes that's going to be for the future water for the tree. So we've got it drug in here a good ways away from the tree, and what we're going to do is we're going to cut it off, and we're going to break one of these injection molded goof plugs off of the rack and plug it up, and we're going to use that when the tree root system starts to get out here, or to encourage the tree root systems to get out here. We've got a couple other ones that we need to do now. So when we installed the irrigation on this tree, we put this J loop in that came out and came around the tree, and it terminates in that box. And off of that tube, we ran 3 systems, 3/4-inch tubes into the tree. We put the drip emitter in the middle, and these pieces that we see are just extensions after the drip emitter. So as the tree begins to grow, it's not a problem to pull these up and snip them off to encourage the roots to move further and further away. And the way that we did that, we could do that a few times over the first couple of years to get this tree root system to start expanding out of the existing container. If you do this correctly, at some point in time you'll get these out, and you may even increase the emitter size. At some point you'll actually unplug the tubes that we put in for the future water for this tree and reinstall these in an outward trajectory, and you'll have plenty of irrigation out and around this tree to irrigate it to be a successful tree where you have great anchorage as well as great canopy. So in wrapping up, we've got our tree in the ground, and I just wanted to hit a few points of what we did. We made sure that we didn't plant our tree any deeper than it was already in this container. We dug our hole 3 to 5 times wider than it was necessary, wider than the container. And we put the tree rings and the stakes on, and the tree's nice and loose in there right now, but you're going to have to check your calendar and mark something to go back and look at that, because the last thing that you want is for that tree to get too tight inside that tree ring. And if the tree gets strong enough, you can take the stakes and the tree rings off. The goal is to make the tree stronger. You would probably do a little bit of pruning of anything that got damaged during the planting, but you'd leave the rest of the pruning for 2 to 3 years from now when the tree's established.
Thanks for watching our video on selecting and planting a young desert tree. We hope you found it informative and helpful. For more information on desert plants, check out the AMWA website, and feel free to visit the Scottsdale Xeriscape Garden at Chaparral Park, located on the southeast corner of Hayden and McDonald Road, and take a self-guided tour.